I would like to introduce to us all the MP, our MP for South Basildon and East Thurrock, Steve Metcalfet. Stephen, I'm just going to say a little bit, so I'm not stealing your show. Okay, so I'm just going to say a little bit. Of course, I don't know everything about Stephen, but this is, I think, what I got off the internet. So if it's incorrect, I got it off the internet. Okay, Stephen began his political career as a district councillor for Epping Forest, where he was portfolio holder for customer services, ICT, and e-government. As a councillor for 5 years, he campaigned on an array of issues, including green belt protection and engaging young people in politics. In 2005, Stephen stood as the Conservative parliamentary candidate in Ilford South before standing in South Basildon and East Thurrock in 2010, where he was duly elected as Member of Parliament. At the 2015 general election, Stephen was re-elected with an increased majority. At the 2017 snap election, Stephen was re-elected with a majority of over 11,000 and took 57% of the vote in South Basildon. Am I right? Yeah. Well, yeah, so far so good. Okay, this is where it all ends. His outstanding political record is as a result of the hard work that Stephen and his team always put into the community. And to be quite honest with you, genuinely, Stephen is a community-spirited MP. I think when I first got some of his newsletter of the work that he does in the community, it absolutely blew my mind away. And what attracted me to Stephen was the work that he was doing with the young people. So it was two minds together working for the same set of people in the community. Can you welcome with me Stephen Metcalfet?
Thank you very much. I'm going to use your keyboard, if I may, just as a lectern. Right, Yetunde, thank you very much. So, as you've heard, I am Stephen Metcalfet. I am the Member of Parliament for South Basildon and East Thurrock, an area that goes from North Benfleet and Bowers Gifford, all the way down through Basildon, through Pitsea, through Vange, out towards Langdon Hills, and then all the way down to East Tilbury, West Tilbury, Stamford-le-Hope, Corringham, Horndon on the Hill, Alsyd, Bulford, and back up round Pitsea Creek. So a really big and diverse area. And as you heard, I've been very fortunate to have been elected as Member of Parliament now 3 times. 3 times in the last 7 years. And it is an absolute privilege and honour to do that, to be the Member of Parliament, to have that opportunity. But how did that happen? I often ask myself that. How did it happen? How did I get here to have be the Member of Parliament for such a vibrant, interesting, diverse area, and having fought 3 elections in the last 7 years? Because actually my background is very ordinary. I grew up in a 3-bedroom, semi-detached house in Loughton with my 2 sisters and my parents. My mother, just after I was born, had moved with my father down from Manchester, and so to make some money she started doing typing and what was then called duplicating, a bit like photocopying now, at home. My father had recently given up his job and started to run a small printing company with my mother doing the typing. She would then go out in the evening and try and teach other people to type to earn an extra bit of money, and that's what we did. Money was tight, but they were generous. Generous parents, but they taught me, well, as I was growing up, the value of money, that you had to work hard if you wanted things, you had to work for them. And that's what they did. And I remember during the summer of '76, which is a very long time ago, and very few people will remember it, but it was sweltering hot, and my father had just moved out of a shed in our back garden where he had one small printing machine, and he'd got a tin-roofed office out about 15 miles from where we lived. But the problem was, during that summer, the temperature inside got up to about 120 degrees. So he was getting up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, going to work before the sun came up and it got too hot, would work through till lunchtime, and then shut down the factory on his own and come back, sleep for a bit, and then go back to work in the middle of the night so that he could keep on working. And I grew up in that atmosphere, and it taught me the value of having to work for something. But I won't deny that politics was something that was around in my household. We talked about politics. My parents were interested in politics. And so my first political experience was not when I became a councillor, as Yutumbi said. It wasn't when I fought the 2005 general election in Ilford South. It was actually all the way back in 1974. And I was 8 years old, and I stood in my primary school class election as the Conservative candidate. So I knew I was a Conservative all the way back then. And there was a Labour candidate and a Liberal candidate, and I was the Conservative candidate. And at the time, again, very few of you will remember this, but we were having power cuts all the time. The miners were on strike, so there was not enough coal to keep the power stations operating. People were going shopping by candlelight. They used to stick a candle on their shopping trolleys and go around the supermarkets by candlelight. And I actually talked about some of those problems, about the power cuts, about the strikes, about the fact that in 1974 there was so little electricity, businesses were only able to operate 3 days a week. And I talked about those things, aged 8. And my two opponents, one talked about having longer holidays and free sweets at break time, and the other wanted no homework and easy lessons. Now, guess what? I didn't win that election. Because, funny enough, the electorate were not ready for that very serious political message. So, I didn't get many votes. The moral of that story is I carried on. I carried on worrying about the things that were affecting the country and carried on having that interest in politics. And it was in my blood. It got into my blood. And so I started to get involved, very much like you have and like people you're associated with, in my local community. I became a school governor. I've got involved in local charities. I took on responsibility within my community to do things for others. I actually didn't ever think I would work or become a politician. I just carried on doing community stuff. But eventually someone suggested that because of all that community stuff that I was doing, I might like to think about being a councillor. And so probably in my late 20s, I stood for my first council election and lost very badly. Now, not unsurprising, it was a very difficult seat. I was never going to win it. I was up against the leader of the Labour group on the council, and he got 6 times more votes than I did. But I fought my first proper election. And eventually I fought 9 more elections, 9, over the next decade until in 2002 I was finally elected a councillor for Epping Forest District Council. Very quickly I became a cabinet member. I took on some additional responsibility. And while, yes, I was in charge of e-government and customer services, the big responsibility I took on at the time was for waste management. And it was at the time of going from having your bins collected once a week to having them collected every 2 weeks. And it was a complete and utter disaster. The whole of the borough was in uproar. And so I thought, well, the only way to tackle this is head on. And so I gave out my mobile phone number. And I got 1,000 phone calls in a week, people leaving messages. But what it did do was demonstrate to the public that we were actually listening. And although there were a lot of anger and they were very fed up about what had happened, they were also equally grateful that someone was willing to listen to them and engage with them and try and resolve their problems. And it was at that point that I realised that if you want to make a real difference, you have to step up and take on more and more responsibility. And that's where the journey for me really started to become an MP. Now, because of my background and because of my education and because of where I'd come from in life, I genuinely never thought that I would become a Member of Parliament. It just didn't happen to people like me. An Essex boy who'd grown up in a 3-bedroom semi, this was for other people. But what I found was the more I kept doing things, the more I got involved in my community, the more I got involved as a councillor, the more responsibility I took on, the more people kept saying to me, you should think about that, you should do that, you should step up because you'd be a good example to someone. And so eventually I was persuaded that I should, and in 2003, not long after I'd become a councillor and taken on that responsibility, I started to explore how you become a Member of Parliament. And in my party, what we have to do is we have to get onto a list of approved candidates. And to do that, there's a process. There's always a process. So you have to have an interview, and then you have to fill in an application form. And then eventually you go away to a residential weekend for what's called a parliamentary assessment board. And basically it's lots of people trying to work out whether you have got the skills, the talents, the self-awareness to be a member of parliament. It's like doing all your GCSEs, or for the older ones, O-levels, all at the same time, all on one day. It's a really demanding process. But I was fortunate and I got through that. And then I had to find a seat to fight. Now I wanted to test whether or not I was the right person to do this. And so I was looking for a seat that I could fight and lose. I was looking for a seat to lose. What I described as an apprenticeship seat. And so, as Yutundi told you, I stood in Ilford South and had the most fantastic time. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Completely different area to Basildon and Thurrock, but a real eye-opener. And for 18 months, me and a very small team of volunteers fought an election campaign against a chap called Mike Gapes, who is still the Member of Parliament for Ilford South. And exactly has been predicted, I lost. And at 2 o'clock in the morning on the first Thursday in May in 2005, the absolute predictable thing happened and I lost by 9,000 votes. But I did go up to Mike Gapes, the then Member of Parliament, and say to him on the steps of Ilford Town Hall, "I'll see you in 4 years." Now I thought he thought I meant I'll be back to fight him in 4 years. What I meant was, I like this, I want to do it, I now want to get into Parliament. And it wasn't long after that, actually in 2006, that I got selected to fight South Basildon and East Thurrock, the constituency I now represent. And it's been the most extraordinary journey. Following that selection in 2006, we set about campaigning. And we never got personal. We never discussed the personalities of the individuals. We just talked about the politics, the choice that was on offer for people. And me and a team that grew over the next 3.5 years until we got to the election in 2010, we delivered well over 1 million leaflets. We spoke to tens of thousands of people, knocked on tens of thousands of doors, held meetings, street stalls, community events, got involved, got embedded in the community. And what I found is the more I embedded myself, the more people we spoke to, the more work that we did, the more confident I became of winning the seat. And so on that night, on the 5th of May in 2010, and Bob was there, I was pretty confident that I was going to be the next Member of Parliament for South Basildon and East Thurrock. Right up until the moment they opened the ballot boxes and started counting the votes. And on this occasion, I won. It was. Thank you. And with that announcement of the result, with the current Chief Executive of Basildon Council, he stood up on a stage in the Towngate Theatre and said that I was the winner. He handed me an envelope, and with that my life changed. From being a printer and just working in my local community, suddenly I was the elected representative of 73,000 people in South Basildon. And with that comes a huge responsibility. Now, it really didn't actually sink in immediately, because it wasn't until that weekend, because for those of you who will remember, there was still no government, and we weren't sure who'd actually won the election. And it wasn't until the weekend and someone rang me, one of the whips are the people who organise politics in Parliament, rang me to ask my opinion about who I thought should be Prime Minister, whether we should form a government. And it was at that point it suddenly sank in that I was carrying this huge responsibility. Now, has anyone been to Parliament here? Excellent. Fantastic building. I would encourage you all to get in touch with either me or your local Member of Parliament and come and visit Parliament, because it's a fantastic place. And I've been there a few times before I was elected. But the very first time you walk through the door of the Houses of Parliament, knowing you are an elected representative and that you have a right to sit there, it is the most extraordinary experience, because you're carrying all that responsibility, all that trust that people have placed in you by putting a cross on a piece of paper is now on your shoulders. And to that very first time you walk in there is the most extraordinary experience. But then it's time to get on with the job. And there are three very distinct parts to my job. So there's doing the community side of things, there's being out there visiting charities, businesses, factories, schools, local councils, all those sorts of things. The actual community stuff. And it's the most wonderful part of the job. For one end of the day, I could be at the top of the cranes down at London Gateway, the new container port, and in the afternoon I could be helping 5-year-olds read. It's just an extraordinary array of things. The second part of my job is helping people on an individual basis. People who come to me and say they've got a problem with their neighbours or with their benefits or with getting a passport, a whole array of different problems, and we help them on an individual basis. And then the third part is the work in Parliament. And of course that's the bit that I had no experience of. This was all completely new to me. So I was like a new boy at a new school with my satchel and my packed lunch and not really sure what I was supposed to be doing. But someone very helpful, my whip, the person who was helping me learn how to do this, suggested that I might want to put myself forward to ask a question on the first day. So I did. I filled in the form with some help and I stuck it into the table office. The table office is where you put your question so that it can then go into a ballot. And they took all the questions and they drew out the top 20 questions. And I came out number 1. So I was going to ask the very first question of the new coalition government back in 2010. The first day that the Prime Minister would be in the chamber, David Cameron, and I was going to be there. I had that privilege. And I thought, it can't be that difficult. All I've got to do, someone told me, you stand up and you say, number 1, Mr. Speaker. You then hear the question, your question that's been written down, answered, and then you stand up and you ask what's called a secondary question, supplementary question from the Minister. I go, well, I've got the question written down. So the Speaker says, Stephen Metcalfet. I stand up. Number 1, Mr. Speaker, sit down. The Minister answers. I stand up. And at that moment, there is this enormous roar from the opposition who are trying to intimidate me. It's the most intimidating sound. And I stood up and I looked at my piece of paper and I looked at the Minister and I looked at the Speaker and I went deaf, dumb and blind all at the same time. It was like a rabbit caught in the headlights, and it still makes the hairs on the back of my neck go up because it was the most terrifying experience I have ever had, and it is second to none. But fortunately, having got that most terrifying experience out of the way, everything else has then been slightly more relaxed. But it was quite an extraordinary experience. And that was the start of my journey as a politician. And that journey continues today. So on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday at 10 AM, I am up for election as the chairman of the Education Select Committee. Select committees are committees that exist to scrutinise what the government does. Now, I'm really looking forward to Wednesday. I'm hopeful that I will get elected as chairman of the Education Select Committee. But I have to say that previously, up until the election was called in April, I was chairman of the Science and Technology Committee. And I had a passion for science and technology, a passion for all it can do for all of us, for society, but for the world as well, to tackle some of the issues that you were talking about earlier, about food security, about access to clean water, some of the things that we wouldn't even give consideration to. Science and technology has the ability to solve those. And that's why I was so passionate about it. But unfortunately, following the election, that committee was traded away, it was given away to another party, which means I couldn't stand for re-election. And I can't tell you how disappointed I was that that committee that I've worked so hard to get onto the committee and then to chair, so it was 7 years, since 2010, I've been working to get to being chairman of that committee, to have it snatched away from you and given to someone else. It was an indescribable feeling. But the moral of that is that obstacles do get thrown in our way as we take a journey. And we may stumble and we may fall, but we have to pick ourselves up, we have to dust ourselves down, and we have to get on with it. We can sulk, we can be angry, We can be fed up to the back teeth, but we mustn't allow it to break us. We have to just get on with it. And you have to believe in yourself. Believe that you have got what it takes to carry on and strive to be better. So I am disappointed about that. I'm disappointed I can't carry on chairing that. But I'll pick myself up and I'm going to try and chair the Education Committee so that I can take some of those skills that I had and passion I had for science and technology to education. And that's what I do. And I hope that come Wednesday, I'll be there chairing that committee. So what have I learnt over my 40 years, my 40-year journey? I think first, is be yourself. Be honest, decent, and always look for good in others. Always look for the good. And always be the best that you can at what you're doing. And always make sure that you can look yourself in the eye. And if you can continue to look yourself in the eye every day, every morning, then you know you're probably doing it okay. Won't be perfect, but you've got to be able to live with yourself. The second thing I've learned is I've developed an underlying philosophy that hard work leads to reward. It's what I got from my parents, it's what's made me who I am, it's what's helped me get on in life. And I think the other thing is never blame others for your own shortcomings. Always look to yourself about what you can do rather than what someone else can do for you. The third thing I've learned, that the harder I've worked over those 40 years, the luckier I have got. And you may have heard that before. The harder I've worked, the luckier I've got. And that's because actually, when you do work hard, things tend to come your way. And people will believe in you. They will see that hard work. They'll think you're trustworthy. They'll think you're someone that they can put their trust in. And finally, believe in yourself. Completely believe in yourself. There is absolutely nothing anyone in this room can't do if they put their mind to it. If they have the skills, the talents, the commitment and the passion, believe in it. Set a goal. Be an astronaut. Be an international football player. Be a top scientist. Don't think for 1 minute that people from your background, my background, can't do what they want to do. They can. They just have to have a passion for it and keep going for it. And ask people for advice along the way. And if you don't like the advice you're given, seek some different advice. But don't give up. Just keep going. Keep going, and one day you may turn around and find that you have arrived at the destination. That's what I've done. So have a passion for life. Enjoy it, but above all, enjoy the journey as well as the destination. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you and for all you are doing to inspire young people. Thank you.